Well, hello and welcome to all of our viewers here today. I'm Fiona Lang Sharp, IBCLC Director of Communications and MC here at Gold Learning. Well, welcome to you all joining us here today. I am very pleased to be sitting down with Melissa Bartick. She is with us here today, and she is going to be joining us live here at Gold Learning. And let me tell you, this is going to be absolutely a fantastic symposium. We have our Gold Learning Online Infant Sleep Symposium coming up for 2020, and it's right around the corner. It's going to be live on June 17th. So, for all of you that love to come to our live events and know how fabulous they are for engagement and learning and collaboratively working together, then do join us on June 17th. Put that on your calendar right now. Now, you know that that is going to be saved as a recording as well. So, all of you that might have to miss out on that live event, of course, you'll be able to listen to the recording as well. So welcome to you, Melissa. It's great to have you here at Gold Learning.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, Melissa, this is a very important, symposium that we have here at Gold Learning, and of course, it's our first one. We've had many presentations talking about sleep because, of course, we all know that this is such a big topic, hot topic. It's not a topic that ever goes away, but sometimes it doesn't get the right attention. It gets more of a negative attention, right? So we're talking a little bit about that today. So why don't you tell us a little bit, first of all, where you are in the world, and then perhaps tell me a little bit about what you're going to be sharing.
I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. I work as a hospitalist, and one of my research topics is sleep. Infant sleep and sudden infant death, and I got interested in that because the messages around bed sharing were preventing women um, from I thought meeting their breastfeeding goals or
Hmm.
potentially meeting their breastfeeding goals. And if they can't meet their breastfeeding goals, then that could affect maternal and infant health. Um, so um, so that's how I got interested in this topic. Um,
That's right. So this topic, of course, is titled Bed Sharing and Breastfeeding, Evidence and Recommendations. And of course, over the years, we've seen a lot of recommendations come out. Some of them, in fact, haven't even changed, it seems, for years and years. So what are some of the things that you've seen most recently in the changes? Has there been any updates in what we recommend to our parents about bed sharing and breastfeeding?
well, fortunately, there have been a shift in several countries toward what's known as a risk minimization approach, as
Hmm.
opposed to the previous approach, which has just been blanket recommendations against any form of bed sharing. And now there's been more of a recognition that parents do bed share,
Hmm.
and that it's important to recognize that and just to talk about ways to decrease that risk. But I think one of the most important things that have come out was in January, the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine published a bed sharing and breastfeeding um, protocol that
Hmm.
has what I think are the most up-to-date recommendations around that topic. And I was one of the authors of that protocol. So I'll be talking a lot
Excellent.
about that.
That's excellent, and a great resource that is as well. Melissa, over the years, as long as you can think back to when you started looking at protocols and, safer sleep and all those types of things, did you feel like, the industry itself, just in parenting and sleeping was often driven by fear versus, actual evidence? Is that something that we've always seen? Because as long as I can remember, that's how it feels.
Um, I think there's quite a bit of fear, and
Hmm.
I think part of it is because understandably, when an infant dies tragically, it's a very emotional topic,
Hmm.
and it's something that people react very strongly to,
Right.
and so people want to avoid that kind of outcome at any cost.
Hmm.
And and so it's understandable.
Mhm.
But what I talk about is that the recommendations around bed sharing and have sort of arisen over time when formula feeding was the norm.
Right.
So that's sort of where this came from. And
Mhm.
formula feeding with bed sharing actually isn't a safe situation,
Mhm.
but breastfeeding and bed sharing is normal physiology. And that's what we really have to recognize and make a paradigm shift around that. And that these are two completely separate entities, and one of
Right.
them is not safe.
Mhm.
Um, or not safe in its current form, perhaps could
Mhm.
be made safer. And one of them is the normal way humans were designed to sleep and raise their infants.
Right. Yeah, it seems like the evidence hasn't always caught up with the protocols, but I can definitely say that working as an IBCLC, it's always a conversation that happens, and I also make sure to talk about it, especially when we're trying new positions and that type of thing, because of course there's lots of unsafe services that mothers end up with their babies and breastfeeding, like the sofa, like the rocking chair, and they're always really surprised, but then very grateful. I mean, there's a lot of gratitude when you're a parent. If you don't know, thank you for sharing. But it seems a lot of times that, we've not been given the privilege of being able to really share honestly or openly about it, what has been considered to be safe and what we've seen in those protocols for a long time. Do you think that we're actually now going to see those things move further ahead and see evidence be, put into place by the bigger organizations, pediatric associations around the world?
I think that some of the pediatric associations are making those recommendations, but some of them are going to be slower to catch up.
Mhm.
And some of that might have to do with the perception of medical legal risk
Right.
around these tragedies.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that we really need to put our resources around where the real risks are with
Okay.
bed sharing.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing. And that
Mhm.
if you just make a blanket recommendation around no bed sharing for anyone,
Mhm.
and you put all your resources into that instead of into where it actually matters, then you're
Mhm.
not having a great use of resources.
Mhm.
Um, if, for example, you emphasize breastfeeding, you eliminate quite a lot of the other risk factors for infant death. So, for
Mhm.
example, a breastfeeding bed sharing dyad, the infant is not going to be sleeping prone
Mhm.
because infants don't sleep prone when they're bed sharing and breastfeeding. They roll on their backs. So that's one risk factor that just naturally goes away.
Right.
Another thing that often happens with formula feeding bed sharing infants is they're more likely to be put to sleep on a pillow
Mm.
or in an unsafe position in the bed. And if they're bed sharing, that doesn't tend to happen. They're put to sleep across with their head across from the mother's breast. And so that's something that naturally goes away
Mhm.
um, if they're breastfeeding, and then they don't tend to be as deeply asleep, so they're less arousable.
Mhm.
So that's another thing that is prevented by breastfeeding. So you eliminate quite a few risk factors with emphasizing breastfeeding.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one thing that would help, and then emphasizing things that like sofa sharing and tobacco
Right.
cessation is important. And
Mhm.
tobacco cessation has a lot of structural factors involved. I mean, if we did things like curbing tobacco advertising and increasing tobacco taxes, then we could eliminate probably a lot of infant mortality just from that. And in Europe, when tobacco taxes went up, infant mortality immediately dropped by quite a significant amount. So, if we really are serious about cutting infant mortality, then we would be doing things like looking at ways of curbing tobacco use, such as increasing tobacco taxes. That would be one way to make bed sharing safer, because
Wow.
people are going to bed share. It's
Right.
hardwired in the human brain, and we're not going to stop people by telling them not to bed share. I
Hmm.
mean, babies sleep with teddy bears. It's
Right.
it's in it's in our brains.
Yeah.
We're not going to
Yeah.
stop that.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, those are really interesting, statements you made too about Europe. I'm very interested to hear more, and I believe you're going to be talking about those during your presentation as well. That was something I didn't know, but very interesting how a society can influence the determinants of what happens in to death in an infant. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's very important, and I think it's important that we not lay all the blame for any infant deaths directly on the mother, because
Right.
it's not
Of
the
course.
mother that should bear the sole burden for infant death. A lot
Hmm.
of this has to do with social determinants of health and structural factors, because most of the infant deaths happen in marginalized and poor communities. So
Hmm.
it can't just be a mother's fault. There have to be
Right.
structural issues surrounding that. So we
Yeah,
really have to address those things.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I will say that after working on your presentation with you today and going through everything, sneak peek, everybody, this is going to be a powerhouse presentation, definitely not
Thank
to
you.
be missed.
Thank you.
Melissa, you have a lot of really good, solid, and somewhat wow moments in your presentation.
Thank you.
And I know that you're very serious about what happens to these babies and just want to get the evidence out there so that we can give value to what parenting looks like and prevent unnecessary things happening to those families that can cause tremendous devastation. Melissa, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this? Like, I know how passionate you are, but what struck you that moment that you said, okay, this is where I want to go?
Well, you may have seen the person in the background who is digging into the refrigerator. That's my youngest son, um, and he's in college now. So my older son, I had a terrible time breastfeeding
Hmm.
and learned a lot about breastfeeding. And then when the second one came along, I used everything I learned, and it was just so much easier to
Hmm.
breastfeed him. And I thought, gosh, I wish somebody had just told me these few little
Right.
things, and I wouldn't have suffered. And no one should suffer the way I suffered to feed
Right.
their child. And
Hmm.
so I just started when I was on maternity leave with that one.
Hmm.
I just started writing letters to whoever policymakers about, we should be doing more about breastfeeding.
Right.
And then when I went back to work, I just kept writing letters. I thought it was a maternity leave project, and here I am. Um,
A few years later.
19 years later, I'm still here. So
You're
anyway,
still here.
you
Much
seen he grew
appreciated.
up.
Yes, that's right. They do grow up. They do grow up. Wow, that's
So,
amazing. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, really for sitting down and giving us a little bit of a snippet and insight to what to expect from this presentation. I know it's going to be fabulous. So I really appreciate you being here today.
well, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for having this whole symposium. It's so important.
Yeah, we are very excited at Gold Learning, of course, to have this symposium. And just a quick reminder for everybody listening in today, Melissa is also going to be here live, so don't forget that because she'll be doing a live Q&A on the day with myself as well, which is going to be great. You'll be able to send in questions in our live chat during the presentation, and we'll capture those for exclusively for Melissa on the day as well. So you can join us June 17th. So again, go to our website at goldlearning.com and click on the link for our Gold Learning Online Infant Sleep Symposium. You'll be able to register for that event right now and join us for the live day. And of course, listen to the recordings as well. Well, thank you again to Melissa Bartick for being with us here today. And of course, to you, all of our Gold viewers. Bye bye for now, everyone.